After I'd processed everything that had happened, and everything you told me about your ancestors and their sacred responsibility, I realized I was sitting on the answer to a question that has plagued me my entire life.
It wasn't supposed to see us.
How to keep this country safe.
It wasn't supposed to know.
Do I need to be concerned?
Maybe we ought to just let this thing be.
Derry, it's a beautiful place, but things do happen from time to time.
25 disappearances, 7 confirmed deaths, mostly children. The oldest 16, and the youngest 5.
He looked at me, he said, Dad, there's something
Dad.
here in Derry.
What is that?
Pennywise, the dancing clown!
It's a clown.
All of the tunnels are underground, where none of the children will ever be found.
You think you can put a leash on this thing? It can't be controlled. You wouldn't be doing any of this if you really remembered everything. What it's like to look it right in the eye. Feel its breath on your neck.
What's the matter? Seeing things? Oh, I think they see you too.
How do you expand on a story when the beginning was the end? Well, if you can't go forwards, the only direction to go is backwards. And who could have guessed that going backwards in Welcome to Derry would not only make somewhat of a chronological sense, but also expand on so much of Derry's lore and history. Welcome to Derry has just done what so many horror franchises fail to do. The first season of the show has officially wrapped up, and I have to say they completely knocked it out of the park, living up to and at times even surpassing the hype that was built up for the series for me personally, which is hard to do considering the genre it was working with, which is horror. Horror being one of those genres that is often 50-50 whether or not the trailer will actually live up to the series itself. And that's where the hype for this series really started for me personally, was with that trailer. Each trailer was genuinely really intriguing and had me excited for the show, but the one with Pennywise's main theme that he had within the sewers, the Down with the Clown song, this sound design was definitely a pleasure to work with. But like with most series, as each episode goes on, there's always a chance that the show really puts all its best stuff in just the beginning and the end, and it turns out mostly middle episodes are just sort of filler. Thankfully, with Welcome to Derry, I felt relatively engaged with the plotline throughout every single episode. I knew we were building up towards this big reveal of the black spot and potentially this fog taking over Derry, yet I still found myself eager to come back and watch Welcome to Derry every Sunday night. Even with the knowledge of some of these characters being safe and being in the future, I still couldn't help but feel the risks and cautions for a lot of these characters going down. Managing to stay afloat through all of its episodes, even despite having some sequences that maybe were a little more lackluster, but I'll get into that more in my criticism section of the show. Either way, the series remained consistently solid with its visuals, its performances, its sound design, but nothing good lasts forever, and with the merger of Netflix and all the sort of IPs that will be floating around, there's always the possibility that this project could take a very different direction. Or the creative minds that went into creating this first season could have their creativity stifled by execs or people that are hungry for more money. So while I cross my fingers there's no Stranger Things Welcome to Derry crossover, I hope you all can join me in appreciating and gushing over how incredible this first season really was. And again, this was no Leviticus level of storytelling if you're expecting some highbrow, deep philosophical nature on eldritch abominations, and you might not necessarily find it there. However, you will find enough love, passion, and creativity put into this series, even when it comes to the tinier details, that prove it's a work of art worth indulging in. And while the season may be over, I still have quite a few video ideas for the show, and am eager to break down more of Pennywise and Halloran in separate videos coming out soon. For me, it all started with the original series, like most. I was very young when I watched it, and my cousins were showing it to me, but I didn't necessarily find it scary. It seemed more to me like an 80s E.T. or Goonie type show, despite the fact that my cousins did reiterate that this clown does kill these kids and even ate a kid at the beginning named Georgie. Still, from what I was seeing on screen, it looked like a happy fun time going against a comically bad guy. Then came high school, where I tried to actually read the novel, as again, by word of mouth, a lot of people recommended it. Mainly the more edgier crowd or horror fans like myself. But still, I will admit, trying to read it in high school, I just couldn't get all the way through it. But to me, I couldn't really comprehend how cool Pennywise was as an entity, and should I had finished the novel, maybe I'd understand more. But from my perspective in reading what I did, I thought it was just a paranormal ghost like Freddy Krueger who just sort of haunted people. Then came the films. Looked like a decent horror movie. I didn't really expect too much going into it. Yet walking away from it, it finally clicked to me why this story was a Stephen King story. It wasn't just a random horror movie with a killer clown taking out people, especially teenagers. This was a clown whose targeting of the kids actually adds to this weird, uncomfortable nature that not only resides in the presence of this entity, but resides in the entire town of Derry. This town that has been plagued by this creature for so long, but also, some could theorize, started by this creature altogether. Obviously, it takes man to build a city, but for this city to grow prosperous, you could assume Pennywise let happen most of the time, allowing more and more meals to be cooked up so that when he woke from his hibernation, he'd have more and more people to feast on. Finally understanding that Pennywise was this sort of eldritch abomination that took root in the earth and plagued humanity for generations, really did build intrigue for me as a cosmic horror fan. Fans of the channel may know that my very first video was breaking down how Arcane became cosmic horror. Please don't go watch that, because I was still learning how to edit that. Either way, the films really helped illustrate Pennywise and how he goes about targeting these victims, because when he's presenting himself as a clown, it seems like an eldritch entity pretending to be human, sometimes forgetting or getting caught up in the performance. But it also proved to me that it thoroughly enjoyed playing with its food. In the series, we find out that Bob Gray was an entertainer and kids would flock to him, becoming a prime target for it, who didn't seem to approach children with the fluidity of the clown or Pennywise form that he does now. And you can see the reason he keeps using Pennywise is because as an eldritch entity, he just likes having fun. But it went even deeper than that, because this show also illustrated that his fear wasn't just visual and audible. He could cause these nightmare sequences and manifestations to come from your very own body. But he also seems to be omnipresent at times, with him appearing to multiple people at the exact same moment when it came to that sewer episode in Welcome to Derry. Now this could be because everyone was going to the sewers and chalked up on fear, and that was closer to his home turf, but either way, we know it is within his skill set to do. We also know that Pennywise himself causes a type of fear that as an audience we could never even gauge. For it seems that even being near him, it causes a type of fear that humanity just can't even control.
What it's like to look it right in the eye, feel its breath on your neck.
This series also did a great job of disproving the misconception that if you weren't afraid of him or simply bullied him a little bit, you'd be able to stop him. As we see, even characters with damage to the brain to neurologically affect their fear center still fall under Pennywise's effect. An effect that we get really well displayed after the Black Spot Massacre, which is this season's big massacre they're focusing on. Each season of the show will touch on a different massacre we've heard about within the books and the films, and if it's anything like the first season, we'll find there's a lot more to the story than was initially revealed. But this series was obviously a passion project because it was paying attention to even the tinier details of the Stephen King and It universe. Like with the turtle symbolism everywhere, even if it was right in front of your face, or the little clown on the fridge before it takes Will. There's returning locations from the films and references from the books, but also newer locations too, like the Deadwood. I like that we get explanations for the smaller things like Rose's shops that gets tied directly to something bigger like the Children of Maturin. Or how they even expanded on Juniper Hill, seen in the It movies where Henry Bowers was sent after he went insane. Juniper Hill to me is a very solid potential season 2 of the series where we can follow more of Ingrid taking different patients down to Pennywise. How they would tie this necessarily into the Bradley gang, I'm not 100% sure. But still, there's a lot of narrative potential there, and I never expected a series following the Black Spot Massacre to also follow the really awful plan by General Stupid, but we'll get into that later. My final note of interest on the creators paying attention to detail was the reintroduction of Catherine Lumen playing yet another Derry resident. They've played the person on the missing posters in Chapter 1, the bully in Chapter 2, and this person looking outside of the window here when the fog rolls in the show. Meaning it's likely, hopefully if the actor sticks around, that they will be a past victim of Pennywise that he assumes the form of. Either way, the series proves to be more than just a cash grab or a recreation of the films. It sets up a story through Derry's history while also establishing lore from the future of the films, all while watching how Pennywise used to torture and mess with his victims in each previous cycle. And it seems over the years, Pennywise has been getting weaker and weaker. As in this iteration of the cycle, we see his hair is still fluffy and curly, he still seems to be fully capable of nightmare fuel, and if he takes damage, he bounces back quite a few times before he fully gives up. Versus when he faces off against the Losers Club, he's very, very weak in comparison. His hair more frayed, more cracks on his Megamind forehead. But I also think, with the concept that Pennywise as an entity sees time differently than humans do, past, present, future, and all that, and the show going into the past, I think we'll see the birth of Pennywise and also the rebirth of Pennywise in sort of a future installment of the series should the next 2 seasons do well. Whether that be in movie form or another spin-off form, I'm not quite sure, but I do think there's a lot of narrative potential to continue Pennywise's story after his defeat by the Losers Club. But going backwards in time could be the best way to reintroduce him rather than drop a new movie and say, somehow Pennywise returned, here's a small bit of exposition. Now you get many years of narrative build-up to explain why Pennywise could potentially return in our own modern day. And considering a lot of modern day kids are used to just always using technology and being caught up on their phones, there's less of a chance of people coming together. And the idea of people coming together as friends and caring for each other to support each other in stopping this thing is a theme found with each installment I'm seeing. And I'm hoping we continue to see through each season of the show. And we already know the show's 3rd season will be its deadliest yet, with the Kitchener Ironworks explosion. This, should the series maintain its footing, will be a bigger version of what we saw from the Black Spot Massacre, which was already pretty great to see. Pennywise was an absolute menace this series, but the Black Spot proved that this dude always had aura every time he was on screen. Whether it was looming in the shadows of a sewer, whether it was being a stark red contrast to a black and white featurette, or whether it was being surrounded by flames, the panicked, and the dead, this dude was always giving a goofy performance that somehow made us, the audience, feel like a Batman to his Joker, with no character really having the full confidence to want to take him on. Unlike the Losers Club, who really come at him with a lot of anger and a mission to kill. Aesthetically speaking, I think it's safe to say Pennywise is the most well-utilized horror icon ever. Michael Myers, Jason X, none of these characters can really live up to the aesthetics I've seen here in Welcome to Derry. With the recent Michael Myers films coming close, but still narratively, they just did not live up to the hype. But man, Bill Skarsgård's performance as Pennywise absolutely did. We already knew he could do it and he had the chops from the movies, but I never thought he'd be able to bring anything more to the character to make me enjoy him that much more. Yet every single time he was on screen, which kinda good on them to seldom use Pennywise as it really helps solidify his fear factor, you could literally write an entire video essay just on Bill Skarsgård's performance itself. But he wasn't the only one. The entire cast was full of people giving really amazing performances that really also fit the narrative well. With the kids killing it, the adults killing it too. Seeing the Hanlon parents freaking out over Will being taken, Charlotte crying, who I will say is a very solid add-on to the Stephen King universe. I really enjoyed her character. But then you get to see Leroy Hanlon, who is slowly becoming the version of the character we see in the future. And I'm so glad they finally used Adepo's acting chops here. The whole season he's been sort of this tough guy slowly breaking down his exterior. This man without fear who slowly turns out to have fear, but in these moments where he's freaking out and desperate to solve things with his son, you really could feel every emotional impact and how much fear was resonating right off of him. I also like the small introduction of him having a shine ability as well, which really adds to the character of Mike, his grandson. But man, his scene with Halloran really did show me how much emotion these two actors could portray. Which, I'll get to Halloran, he's a big highlight for me in the series too. But before I get to his character, let's go through some of the criticisms, because we can't really pretend this series was absolutely perfect. No, there were definitely some lowlights and some very questionable moments. Like with the ghost attack at the cemetery. The episode itself was fine, and we got some good development with all the characters. And even conceptually seeing kids ride away on bikes as the ground opens up behind them is cool enough by itself. But man, this felt like an entire Ghostbuster sequence, especially considering all the kids made it out fine. It's sequences like these that make you question what Pennywise's methods actually are. It's safe to say maybe he stopped chasing the kids because they got a picture and he wanted to mess with them and let them think they could prove something to the police. But part of me wonders why throughout this entire sequence he doesn't just take someone. It seems for some kids he gives them no leeway and takes them out almost instantly. But then for other kids, he really takes his time building up their fear and messing with them, which I have to assume this sequence was. There's also the chance that some of these characters have the shine, which is the reason the Losers Club were never really instantly killed off, but still we don't really know for sure. There was also the lore flashback. It was a little bit stiff, not the worst thing in the world, and the details itself were very intriguing. And while it does make sense coming from a kid as a sort of ancestral story that you heard growing up, the whole sequence just felt a little bit corny for me. Still, I did really enjoy that moment with Pennywise approaching the chief as a priest. And it does make sense to have the very first version of the Losers Club be a group of native kids. Another big problem I had was the Phil reveal. It seemed really unnecessary considering you could achieve the same effect with Pennywise revealing himself with the other kids that were already dead and Maddie turning out to be Pennywise. In my head, it seems there was extra effort put in to add detail to the idea that Phil could be alive, only to reveal he was dead in the same instance that Teddy and Susie also died. With Maddie, you get him manipulating the kids to bring them down to the sewers and revealing himself as Pennywise, so it makes sense. With Phil, it leads you to wonder why would they ever leave the breadcrumbs of his survival whatsoever, as there was no real extra added effect except for maybe over-analytical YouTubers like myself and seeing Phil's corpse. But I gotta say, the biggest, most worst criticisms I have of the show, the biggest sin the show has made so far, and what could actually break the show for some people, is the General. The General and his ideologies made absolutely no sense to me. His plan was to release Pennywise and have that fear become a form of control, assuming that the cycle continues without his barriers. If you think about this logic, even for more than 2.5 seconds, you'd see how bad of a plan it really was, considering Pennywise's capabilities. This general straight up released a killer clown that eats people, walked directly to him, and got surprised that this killer clown that eats people wanted to eat him too. I was really hoping there'd be more explanation for why exactly he was so adamant about releasing him. Like maybe there was a part of his flashback where he formed a bond with Pennywise. Or maybe he had been hit with the deadlights at some point and just lost his mind altogether and didn't realize it. I even thought as he was coming back to Derry and remembering more and more, maybe there'd be something there. But nope, as far as we can tell, General Shaw was just a really stupid guy. Again, it's not too late to really fix his character, because as each season goes on, you could really explain more and more of his character and their motivations, but at this point, it's pretty much too late. I will say, however, it is interesting that him and Ingrid were the only two characters to ever have a chance at surviving Pennywise, both of whom completely spoiled their chances, though General Shaw's was definitely less intentional. Universally, as a horror fan, I would have liked to see more characters go throughout the series. However, I think this final moment with Rich's character wouldn't have hit as hard as it did, because this moment really did pull at the heartstrings.
I might get emotional, oh no. My boy Richie coming back to save the day twice. Fuck yeah, tell him Richie.
I will say this series was a complete home run for me, with my two favorite aspects being both how the shine was used in going up against Pennywise, Having such an iconic horror character go up against such an iconic user of Stephen King's power or magic system really left me intrigued to see how each episode would go about it. And they did go about Halloran's character very well. He never seemed OP or powerful or ahead of anyone else except for his fellow soldiers. But the minute he starts going up against Pennywise, he starts losing all of his confidence. And I won't go too deep into his character, as I do want to make a separate video breaking down his character altogether and Pennywise separately. I will say seeing them together was absolutely fantastic, with the best moment for me being Pennywise surrounded by the dead and flames teasing Halloran. But I also really didn't expect Halloran to hold his own, at some point even being able to stop Pennywise altogether. But then I realized one of Pennywise's biggest weaknesses: all beings must follow the rules that their shape inhabits them to make them do, or whatever that quote is. Essentially meaning when he's a clown, he takes damage like a clown would. Though obviously still able to bounce back and survive certain things, you can still slow him down, and it seems with the shine, you can still tap into the living souls still being tortured within the deadlights. With Halloran tapping into Bob Gray's soul, or memories, or however you want to see it. Maybe it's even just the fact that Bob Gray was dead that Halloran was able to do so. And while the show did prove that Pennywise is stronger than the Shine at the end of the day, it does raise the question of how well Pennywise would do against a character like Vecna from Stranger Things. In my head, Pennywise takes the cake easy, but with Halloran being capable of doing what he did, it does kind of leave you wondering. But another great aspect of the show, and the final point I'll touch on, is just how heartwarming it was, which is helped by the performances and directing and sound design, but in general, there were so many moments that just really left me more emotional than I ever anticipated watching this show. Even in the first episode, I actually felt for Lily's character who lost her dad. I felt for Ronnie as she was desperate to save her own dad. And with Rich's big moment during the Black Spot Massacre, despite the fact that I fully expected it to happen, I actually felt really moved by how they went about it. Marge as a character starts off as someone who could be very unlikable, but you really learn to root for her throughout the story. And somehow knowing that she ended up being Richie's mom does fit so well with their personality types and how they carried themselves. Not similar necessarily, but you could easily see how they're related. Also really enjoyed every time the kids came together as a group and really tried to support each other. But man, I gotta say, my most emotional moment of the series was probably when Rich showed back up to flip off Pennywise. That to me felt like such a culmination of the shine, of Pennywise escaping, of everything the kids were going through, the trauma, the generational torment, this character who lives on in a future child of said character. Everything about this one little moment really did solidify Welcome to Derry for me as one of the perfect ways to expand on a horror movie universe. Not only building upon the world of Derry, but expanding different elements like the Shine or Dick Halloran. Seeing the Shine being able to be used in such an interesting way, like Halloran seeing the War Chief and the natives themselves not seeing the War Chief like Halloran does, but sensing their presence, was a really well done and well crafted moment. And even at Rich's funeral, where they tied everything together and you got to see everyone sort of get over this nightmare of an event, seeing Rich right there supporting his parents and his friends really did hit me a little hard too. And Rich wasn't even my favorite character. Still, small moments like these, world building, attention to detail, character consistency, all of this is what makes a great first season of a show and a phenomenal expansion of a series. But like with every first season of a show, we are left with a few questions. Questions like what happens to Will and why he ends up burning in front of Mike down the line. Was it an accident, or did the entity have something to do with it? Why did we hear Veronica's voice within the pipes during the Beverly scene in It Chapter 1?
Hello? Who are you?
Does the entity somehow get her? Whatever happened to Lily Bainbridge? She wasn't shown, and as far as we know, there's no descendants of hers throughout the story. Did at some point the kids we see in this series maybe return to try to take on Pennywise while he was hibernating? And maybe in doing so, it caused the deaths of some of the characters and maybe some of the events we see transpire between films and series? I'm not quite sure, but I'd like to assume Lily went on to move away from Maine and maybe vacation in Florida for a while. Either way, who's to say whether these questions ever get answered as the series goes on? Whether or not Pennywise will ever return in the future of humanity, or if the Losers Club was really his ending and we're following him back to his beginning. Either way, I want to know what you guys think. Did you enjoy Welcome to Derry? Do you wish they did things differently? Are there characters you wish maybe they did more with or did less with? And why is General Shaw your favorite character in the entire series? Either way, let me know down below. Thank you all for your support, and keep an eye out on the channel for my next video. Is going to be all about Pennywise and Derry.